Welcome to Wild Woman podcast. And today I'm delighted to have Ana Isabel as my guest. And Ana is an astrologer, a hypnotherapist, if I got that right, a speaker, a podcaster, an animal lover. So many words I could use to describe her, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. But most importantly as well, she's also my astrology teacher. And I just feel so privileged to have met her. I was trying to think this morning, I think it's about 2 years ago, Ana interviewed me when I published my book, Gifts from the Devastation. And it was just a wonderful experience. Her warmth, her insight, her thoughtfulness, just her way of communicating that made me feel so safe. So it really was a lovely connection that started and continues to blossom. And I'm just so enjoying the astrology. So it's such a gift that she's agreed to come on the show. So I just know you will really enjoy listening or watching wherever you are at whatever time. So welcome, Ana. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And what a lovely, warm introduction. I feel like I might just blush.
Absolutely. Feel free. Well deserved. And what I'm going to do today, just to start off a little bit, not reversing it a little bit, as you know, the podcast is called Wild Woman. So I'd love your take on what you understand it to be to live as a wild woman, and maybe tell us a little bit about your journey in life to get you to where you are now, living, I believe, as a wild woman.
Well,
putting words in your mouth, sorry.
no, not at all. Wild to me means to be free. And so now we need to ask, what is freedom? And I think that, excuse me, to me, to be free means to be free to be the best that we can be. And that's a very simple statement, and possibly some might say an overused statement, but I don't believe that it's overused. I believe it's not used enough. And what I mean by that is that things are only overused when they're used superficially and where they lose their meaning. The word kind is a really good example of that. Kind means something, but it's now being hijacked by the corporate world to sell products. And it's so used that it's lost its meaning. But we need to go back to what it means. And I think it's the same when I say free to be the best that we can be. That is, it can never be overstated, the importance of that. It is what I aim to do when I'm working with clients, both as an astrologer and as a therapist. It imbues everything that I do. And when I'm teaching, why am I teaching astrology? I'm teaching it because I want to give people tools of empowerment to understand themselves, others, and the world around them, so that they can be free to be the best that they can be. So it's not exactly something I've set out to do, but it is so much a part of who I am that it imbues everything that I do. And I think to be free means to be outside the constraints of what we are told we need to be. So now that brings in a nice little tension that's as old as the hills between the rights of the individual versus the rights of society or the collective. And I'm a great believer in natural law. Basically, do no harm. Do no harm. You stick to that, and you're never going to go wrong. And I think that most people naturally want to do no harm. And they forget themselves sometimes out of fear, because fear brings in the desire to control. But most of us understand the concept of do no harm and want to live by it peaceably, and to be free to do those things that sustain us. So freedom then is the freedom to live without constraint, whilst observing a very simple tenet of existence: do no harm. Do no harm to yourself. Do no harm to others. Do no harm to other living beings on this planet. Do no harm to the planet. And I think that if we live by that, then there is no reason for any outsider to interfere. Now, we are living in a world where it's got confusing, because just to be perceived to be hurting someone's feelings can land you in trouble. And I think there needs to be a balance between intention and individuals taking responsibility for their own feelings. You know, in Britain, these British Isles, where we purport to be great animal lovers, and we are, in law, a dog only needs to be perceived to be a danger to be destroyed. This is an absolutely outrageous state of affairs. Because what does that mean? What does that mean? Perceived to be a danger. I might have a phobia of dogs. A dog bounding towards me happily, wanting to greet me, I am now perceiving as a danger. And the reason I'm bringing up that particular aspect of law is because we are now applying this to human beings. My perception of your words, I've interpreted as harmful to me, and therefore I now have the right to seek to put you in jail. Well, you know what? Not taking responsibility for my feelings is causing you harm. So we have to work at this together. This is a concept which is the idea of do no harm, cause no loss, do no fraud, keep the peace. Keep the peace is such an important part of natural law. But keep the peace does not mean that I'm going to keep quiet and allow anything to happen. Keep the peace means that I myself am not going to be the instigator of conflict unnecessarily. And I'm going to seek to mediate the most peaceful way out of conflict rather than just playing the blame game.
Yeah.
Because that's not responsible either. So these are things which are extremely complicated, and no wonder we're all so confused. We have to tease out and do the best we can. And that brings me back to the freedom to be the best that we can be. Because the more interference we have from people who purport to govern us, and the more interference we have from the wider collective, the harder it is going to be for us as human beings to sort this out. But if we are left to our own devices, we can sort things out. It's the constant interference and the desire to control that divides, creates confusion, and then simple things like do no harm become extremely complicated, convoluted, corrupted, twisted, to the harm of everyone around us, including ourselves. So it's quite a lengthy answer to your question. And, you know, freedom, I think, is probably the single most important thing that any human being is born with as a given right. The right to be free to express. You know, in animals, in law, DEFRA says that us as the guardians of animals, well, they would not use the word guardian, they would say owners. I would say guardian. That we as the guardians of animals must recognize that they have the right to be safe and to express their natural behaviors. Absolutely. I wish that these rights were accorded to them when they're being experimented on in labs. I wish these rights were accorded to them when they're being factory farmed. And by the way, I'm not a vegetarian, but I am very particular because I want animals to have the right to express themselves, and also if we're going to eat them, to be treated with dignity and respect. And I have been a vegetarian. I've gone backwards and forwards on this for a long time. No doubt I might yet go there again. It's one of the
But you have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, as I and everybody else is trying to work out this business. But one thing I am clear on is if we're going to be raising them to eat them, they need to be given the right to free expression, and they need to be treated with dignity and respect. And when it comes to the time that they are dispatched, it needs to be done in as humane a way as possible. So that said, we need to give ourselves now the same rights to freedom to express behaviors that are natural to us, which would be the ability to earn a living, the ability to have a family, the ability to interact freely with others. And those are very simple things, which I believe are encoded in the European Human Rights Act, but which seem to have increasingly be forgotten. And those are the freedoms to express our humanity, our able to be humans. And the same goes for animals. The same goes for every living being. So, again, a long answer. And beyond your answer, I have a feeling that I've gone off in a different direction.
No, it's so many things come up when you speak. And you know, the one overriding feeling I got as I was listening to you there was that a big part of the problem here is that so many of us are living in a sort of traumatized state. And what's happening is, as a result, it's become sort of accepted that we project our own, you know, when you go back to personal responsibility and accountability, that's been a big part, still is, of my journey, when I keep finding myself projecting out at someone else when I'm triggered. And I have to go, okay, there you are, Celine, looking at the world, and I had this example happen to me this last week. I said, very up close and personal, when I said, okay, I was looking at the world going, well, how I help support this is I must resolve and take ownership and accountability of me as a human being in the world and how I interact. None of this changes unless we change the macrocosm and the microcosm. And so I was sort of saying, yeah, great. All that was in a good day. Everything was great. And then I said, okay, so show me, is this how, is this, have I got it right? And next minute I'm faced with a very personal trigger in my life. And boy, was it difficult. Boy, was it difficult. It was right up in front of me. And I reverted back to, not as you were saying, I went all into, I don't like that. How are they behaving? I don't feel comfortable. Blame, 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 blame. And I had to bring myself back. So it just, that seems to me when I listen to you there, and I personally, all of that just makes total sense. It's where I'm at. But it seems to be the big issue is this sort of trauma. We're all going around traumatized and nobody taking personal responsibility for
Exactly.
being a
And
sovereign human being, you know.
absolutely. And this is, you know, I'm sounding very definite in what I say, but I'm also saying it's extremely difficult. And it's something that, you know, I'm offended on a regular basis.
I love that. That should be on a t-shirt.
Everybody the rights to offend me, you know. I'm offended on a regular basis, several times a day. Several times a day, I'm going to be offended by something because I am very, very sensitive. But it's like you said, I need to come back to myself and say, okay, so what is it about this? And I can hear myself going, you know, and I go, okay, yep, that's yeah, of course. And at one level, that's absolutely right. You know, injustice bothers me, unkindness bothers me, a lack of compassion bothers me. Living in a world where that's, you know, that lack of compassion is now being codified in law bothers me. Oh boy, it bothers me. But it's still incumbent upon me to say to myself, yeah, you know what, that was out of order. That was clearly not helpful or positive. Maybe they're having a bad day. Or I wonder what has led to such a miserable disposition being vomited on everybody around them, you know? Understanding that with compassion, and not in a patronizing way, not in a I'm a holier than you because I can see that you're wounded way, but with an open heart, and to say, well, there's somebody who walks in pain. I think I need to go and have a shower now. You know, I need to, you know, kind of cleanse myself because that had a very negative effect on me. And hey, you know, that wound that you thought was sorted, maybe needs a bit more attention again. Maybe a cup of tea or something, to a hot chocolate, probably in my case.
So how do you, you know, in saying all that, and that's what I find so interesting. It's like we're bridging these two worlds of saying, yes, as an individual, we're all going around, we're human beings, we all have our issues, we all have our histories, we all have our stories, we all have that, and we're out. And at the same time, trying to honor this freedom and wildness, and it's really what led me to this podcast. I didn't really know. It's sort of been a very organic process that sort of followed my own journey of learning, and I still am. It's uncovering. I don't claim to know anything other than just be where I am right now, but it's just you've touched on something that I feel very strongly now. I'm seeing it. So sorry, what is my question to you is how do you see right now in the world we can help ourselves navigate that sort of dichotomy of
take responsibility as much as you can for your traumas, for your wounds. And when I say that, this is not about blaming yourself. It is never about blaming yourself. But it is about saying, I need help because this is casting a shadow of pain over my life. And it's clouding my perception. And it's possibly stopping me from being able to have the peaceable relationships that I would like. It's stopping me from being at peace within myself. It's stopping me from being the best that I can be in terms of living up to my gifts, my talents, my potential. So many people don't even know that they have gifts and talents and potential. It's stopping me from being the best that I can be in terms of being compassionate towards myself and others. So those are all the possibilities in which past trauma, past wounds can stop us from being the best that we can be. And that feeds into the frenzy of anger and distrust and hate that is currently out there. It's like a vortex that's out there. And the more that we can attend to our own wounds with compassion and help if we need it, the smaller that vortex becomes and the better the world becomes. So it begins with us. It's no good looking at government. It's really no good looking at government. And, you know, coming back to your original question, which was what I see, you know, living as a wild woman is, it's about living naturally. And it's funny because as a little girl, I was trained to be obedient because that's what we trained children to be, obedient. And we still do that. In fact, I'm looking at children in school now, and I think they have less freedom than I had. And I had extremely controlling parents. I say controlling. Their intention was to be protective, and they were very overprotective. And I was trained to be very obedient. And I'm looking at children now, they have less freedom. They have helicopter parents. They have teachers who are watching every word that they say, not them as teachers, but them as children, lest they should break any of the cardinal sins that have been newly invented, forgetting the fact that they are children. And I see this a lot with parents who come to me in despair because their child is being accused of being really horrible things that actually you should really only be looking at an adult for. It's like we've forgotten about at what age a child can be held accountable and face criminal charges, because they're virtually doing that in schools now.
Mm. Mm.
You know, so
And you
there's
were a
all of
teacher,
that.
weren't you? Yeah, you were
Was a teacher.
Yeah, see.
And so there's all of that, you know, and I'm looking at myself as a child and I think, yeah, I recognize what children are going through because, you know, at home I was trained to be and I was a very good girl. And I never went through a rebellious phase. Maybe until now.
Later.
At that now, I'm properly rebellious in very, but I have always been very rebellious in very quiet ways. I've always held that I will be obedient as long as what you're asking me to do is reasonable. That's been there from a very early age, and my parents would warily, you know, testify to that. Because boy, did we have rows, particularly when I was an adolescent. So it wasn't that I meekly followed what I was told. I didn't go against them, as in I didn't disobey them openly.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean by openly. I never snuck out a bedroom window, but you know.
There are ways and means.
There are ways and means. in fact, all I wanted to do was join the drama club. That was my thing. And I can remember this incredible row with my mother. In fact, I was recalling this with my partner the other day, in which she said to me, "Oh, but you see these as chains, but they're chains of love." And you know what I thought about that, and do to this
Whoa.
day. All I
Well,
wanted,
everything is preparing us, though, isn't it?
I
Everything
wanted
is,
to the drama club. So it's not like I was
yeah,
this big rebel, out
yeah.
taking drugs or anything like that. Well, I never got the opportunity. I could never leave the house. Um, maybe that was a good thing. I think not, but um, and I might add that did not work for my sister, who did go off the rails.
Which you often hear that can, yeah.
So she rebelled in that way. I
Yeah,
rebelled by standing my ground and saying, what you are doing is wrong.
yeah, yeah.
So I was always very obedient until the moment when what was being asked of me was unreasonable. And that has not changed.
Mm,
And I don't think it ever will.
yeah.
Because the point at which you stop me from doing things that are just normal, natural behaviors, which are about my right to express myself as a human being, that's my red line. And that's where I stop being disobedient. And I think that is true for most people.
Yes.
Most people are not out to wreak havoc upon the world. They just want to be able to express their natural humanity.
Yeah.
The point at which they begin to turn is when they're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. And can I ask you, what is your view on, if we look around in the world right now, why so many people, there's only a limited number, it's growing, I think, of people who are recognizing exactly what you're saying and saying, no, there's something wrong here. I'm not out to wreak havoc. I just want to express and share my gifts and interact in a very natural human way. And yet many people are not, let's say, doing that, or are, what do you think is holding people back? Like,
Yeah,
yes, we talked about government, but there's still many people who are not seeing that.
it's fear.
Fear, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we need to understand a number of things here, because we could say that currently we are in an abusive relationship with government. And we can talk about Stockholm syndrome. We can talk about things from many different aspects, but I'm just going to keep it very simple. And I'm going to say that society, by and large, programs us to follow the leader. And we see that in schools. I actually think parenting and schools, as they are set up, unless you had the good fortune of being in a Montessori school or in a Steiner school, they are set up for you to follow. So as children, we are in this relationship of power. And because we are dependent on our parents. We are dependent on the adults around us. And that complete and utter dependency means we are powerless. So it behoves our parents to be wise and to know how to protect us, keep us safe, take care of us, whilst at the same time empowering us. And that comes back to choice. And I keep coming back to dogs, because our relationship with dogs needs to follow exactly those principles if we're going to allow our dogs free expression. If we want a robot, we should buy a robot. If we want a dog, we should allow that dog the right to express itself, because we have taken it out of its natural environment. And at 8 weeks, we are taking them out of their families so that they can bond more easily with us. And there are many contentious issues around that.
Mm.
But we come back, we have this beautiful being in front of us. We need to allow it to express its natural behaviors, which means we need to observe it, understand it, and give it choices. So you're thinking, oh, yeah, right, give a dog a choice. What's the dog going to do? Well, my dog Teddy often has the choice of treats. It's a simple thing. It's not going to allow him to come to harm. It's not, a revolution. I simply hand out 2 different chews and I say, which one would you like? He sniffs each one and he chooses one. And when he has friends round, or when I'm round at his friends' houses and I bring treats with me, I do the same for them. That's choice. So when you take that to a child, allowing the child to make a choice as to what they're going to wear. Okay, now, they might not want to wear a coat and it's a freezing cold day. Well, the choice might not be whether or not they're going to wear a coat, but which coat? Which scarf? So we can empower children by giving them small choices instead of dictating all the time. And when it comes to school, and I was a teacher and I stopped being a teacher. I stopped being a teacher because I did not like the position that I was put in as a teacher, where I have a class of 30 children, some of them clearly in very difficult home situations, who are exhibiting behaviors that are disruptive to the class. And no, intolerance of disruptive behavior does not help. Believe me, it doesn't. What would help is me having a small class, and I mean a very small class, in which I could actually allow the children to express themselves and engage them properly in their learning by doing things together, rather than asking them to sit and listen to me for hours on end so that they're bored. These are children. They should be running. They should be playing. They should be learning by experiencing. And they should also be free to ask questions and to question rules. And that is increasingly disappearing. One really good thing about my education experience growing up, even though all of those things were in place where, we had to be meeting, whatever, one thing we were given was the opportunity to debate. And, it was a Catholic school, and we could have debates about abortion. We could have debates about human rights. We would be given moral dilemmas, and we were given the freedom to debate, and there was no definite answer. Believe it or not, in a Catholic school, there was no definitive answer. Well, we were given the choice and the opportunity to debate, and that has disappeared by and large in many of the schools that I'm privy to knowing what's happening in through my clients. I can see what's happening. And if we do that, we are taking away personal agency, personal power. So when you ask the question, how have we got here, where so many people don't understand, is because so many people, there are many reasons, but one of them is we have been trained to obey. And we were not told that to question was a good thing. And increasingly, that's the case. So that's one reason. And the other reason is quite simply, when we are in an abusive relationship, it's hard to get out, even if we want to. Because what do we do? Where do we go? And we see that with, particularly with women who are victims of domestic abuse. People say to them, well, just leave. Excuse me. How do we leave when we're thinking about not having a place to go, worried about the safety of children, and worried that, because believe it or not, I might love this abusive person because I can see the potential in them. And I feel like I don't want to abandon them. And I'm finding it very hard to let go of the possibility that they might change, because I so want them to change. And I'm finding it very difficult, even if I'm not in love with them anymore, to acknowledge that this situation is hell and I need to, and it's never going to change. The point at which, and I'm speaking specifically of women, but I know men have been in this situation as well. It's just that I have more experience of witnessing this with women than I have with men. So I ask men watching this to forgive me. I am not in any way diminishing your experience. I'm simply using women as an example, because of women that I've seen, the point at which they get out is when the lives of their children have been in danger. And this, and by the way, this is not exclusively, it's not all women who even manage to get out at that point. Some don't manage to get out even at that point. So we come to that point where the danger is so great, we get out. So that's another way of getting that wake up point, that there's a life-threatening situation here, we need to act. So that's another point at which we can leave an abusive relationship. But I think we also need to question, why is it that even at that point, some people don't get out? So this brings us back to learned helplessness. And, you know, the term learned helplessness comes back to studies that were done with dogs. So sorry, we keep coming back to dogs, but I have done a lot of learning through having Teddy in my life. And so it's when I was reading about, I'm going to call it dog psychology, rather than behaviorism, because I just wanted to understand him better rather than knowing how to program him. That was never my intention with Teddy, really. So I learned about this. So what was observed was that dogs who were so traumatized, very traumatized, had shut down to the point where they couldn't function at all. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't make simple decisions. And so a comparison was made between them, where they were given, you know, little puzzles to solve to get food, and dogs who were not similarly traumatized. And the dogs who were not similarly traumatized worked out the puzzles. And as the puzzles got harder, they worked it out because they were learning. In other words, because they were not shut down, their capacity to learn was unimpeded. And so they were able to problem solve. The dogs who were shut down needed everything to be done for them. That's learned helplessness. So now they thought, okay, let's get other dogs to show them how to solve the puzzles. So they could see the other dogs solving the puzzles, but they still could not do it for themselves. And that is an incredibly important point, because they had come to the point where they believed clearly that other dogs could do it, but they couldn't.
Sounds so key, Anna, when you say that, because I was going to ask you, how do we find our way back from this? And exactly what you said there is, and I've witnessed that and I've experienced it, where people have said, but I can't. You can, but I can't. And it doesn't matter that they see, because I was going to say that to you know, we started at the beginning saying about how we have to start with our own lives, and, you know, do this for ourselves. And it's always been my sense, well, if I do that, maybe someone else who's, you know, if I go through that journey and take those steps, someone else who watches me will learn to do it. And now you're saying, no. So
No,
no.
absolutely. We
And I've
do
seen that too. So how do we find our way out of
we
this and
do
into
learn
this?
from each
Hmm?
we do learn from each other. We
Mm.
may get a different perspective, but we always come back to the demons that are inside of us and how we deal with them. And you know, when I was training to be a hypnotherapist, and we were basically in that period of supervision,
Mhm.
I can remember one of my clients. Normally, the way that I work, a session always ends on a positive, always. But in this instance, it didn't. And it was the first time. It doesn't often happen, but it was my first time where it did not end on a positive, because what my client was wrestling with was too big and complex. And although she had gone so far, the subconscious fear and pain and anger was too big, and it started to fight back within that session. So, and we had to stop because she was just too exhausted. And I went back to my supervisor virtually in tears. It's like, I failed. And she said to me, well, you've now understood that you're not in charge. The other person is always in charge. So it doesn't matter what you do, they're always in charge. All you're doing is helping. And what happened here, and she talked about depression as being like an octopus in a tank. And she said to me, your job is not to get in the tank and fight the octopus, because what's happening is that the person is in there with this octopus, and every time they try to come up to the surface, the octopus is pulling them back down. They have to deal with the octopus themselves. And what you did is you tried to get into the tank and got beaten up by the octopus.
And now you're very upset. Yes, you were.
Extremely valuable observation.
Mm. Mm.
So it's absolutely true. We can't do this for other people. We can be role models in certain things, because we're all role models, because we all have things that we've got quite good at, you know? And so we're all role models. Every single person has the potential to be a role model, and actually actively is a role model, because we're all modeling something for somebody. And hopefully we're modeling things that we've learned. That's good. That's about sharing what we've learned. And we all have the capacity to learn. What happens is that sometimes people see that, they understand it, but they still have the octopus in the tank pulling them back down. We need a step ladder. We need to break things down. Those dogs, how were they helped? They were helped by breaking the tasks down to make it possible. So it might be that the task was broken down to the point where there was no task. But instead of just putting the bowl immediately in front of them, maybe it was just an inch away, so that they might just move a little bit to get to the food. And then when they felt more comfortable, maybe put it further away, a little bit further away, so that they could actually get up to it. We have to always understand where the baseline is in ourselves if we're wanting to change ourselves. Where is the baseline? What am I comfortable doing? What am I comfortable doing? And where do I want to get to? I can't get there. I can't get there. It's too much to ask of me right now. So what can I do? What's that little bit that I can do that's just a tiny bit further than where I am right now? Let's get there. And maybe I need help. Maybe that's the tiny bit. Maybe I need help. And if you're in a situation where, you know, you've got children, you need to earn a living, you've got bills to pay, how do I get out? That is not freedom. How do I get out? I know I'm not free. I desperately want out. I can't get there. It's like I'm sitting in a dungeon and I can see the light up there through the bars, but it's a wall that I can't scale. How do I do this? Well, you might ask for help. I call for help, nobody hears me. Are you asking the right people? Are you asking the right people? Are they in a position to help you? Who do you know who might be in a position to help you? And that's a question that I ask of my clients when they're in these situations, you know, single parents at their wits' end, absolutely overloaded with work, children who are struggling, and their struggle through behaviors that is being expressed through behaviors that are quite destructive. How? So we're working together. I'm one ally. Where can we find some more allies? Let's think. Who do you know who might be able to help you find a better job, a better paid job? Is there anybody? If there is, it's time to give them a call and say, look, I'm in this situation and you're very well connected. If you come across anything, will you please let me know? It's sowing a seed. It's sowing a seed, but we need to do that. We need to sow that seed because without that seed, there's no chance.
But it sounds like something had to spark that. Something is going on. Something has started.
Well, usually people come because they're in a crisis.
Yeah.
It might be a health crisis and the doctor says, do something. And so, and I do get doctors referring patients to me because they need help with stress, which is impacting on them negatively. It could be a family crisis. It could be that they are in a moment of despair and somebody has said, here, there's somebody who might be able to help you. And sometimes I get people who don't dare believe that anything can help them because they have been shunted from pillar to post. They have tried this, they have tried that. And it's like, this is the last chance saloon here. So that also happens. But the people who actually seek help, I think, are the lucky ones. Because they will find the help. They will, as long as they seek help, they will eventually find the right thing to help them. Then there are those who seek help and give up because it wasn't the right thing at that moment. So this really comes back to hope, actually, because as long as we have hope, then we will continue to seek the right help. What worries me is those who lose hope and stop seeking help. So if you know somebody who's at that point, to be very gentle and is really important. And let us remember the power of prayer.
What prayer would you put out or hope for humanity where we are now?
I would say that it comes back to being something very simple. In fact, I was reminded of this today doing an interview for my own podcast, that sometimes it begins with just by asking ourselves, what can I bring to this moment? And it comes back against what I said about breaking things down. There is tremendous chaos, upheaval, fear in the world. Funnily enough, there always has been, but it seems to have intensified in the last 3 years and continuing to intensify still. So we need to attend to ourselves. And the simplest way to do that is to focus on the moment. If you're eating a banana, notice its sweetness and take pleasure in that. If you're stroking your cat and it's purring, really bask in that moment, that warmth. If your child is smiling at you, just really smile back, make that eye contact, be very present in that moment, because that's a love moment. If something makes you laugh, laugh, really laugh, engage with that. And it's in those moments that the spark gets stronger. So the more we can do that, the stronger the spark becomes. And here's the best bit. The stronger the spark becomes, the more it shines out and connects with other bright sparks. So we want to talk about the law of attraction. That's how it works. It's not just about visualizing and saying mantras. It's about feeling that connection with the beautiful, with the love, with the joy. Because the more we connect with that, the stronger that bond becomes and the more we allow it in. So that is within all of our powers. And I must say, even within the power of those who are going through the most excruciating times. And we know this because the wonderful Frankl, who survived his time in the most hideous human conditions, perpetrated cruelly upon others. He survived that. And that's his advice. That's what got him through that time. So, and he said in his wonderful book, and the title of the book, for those who would have it, is Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about the importance of this and how those who were able to survive were mostly those who were able to do this.
That's beautiful advice. Sorry, yeah.
The more we do this for ourselves,
yeah,
the more we are attracting light for ourselves. And of course, that then means for others also. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I can remember that book got me through when I was going through cancer as well. Like the line that stays with me is those who can those who have a why can bear almost any how, you know, and it's sort of back to what you said there. So thank you so much. I just hope anyone listening gets a spark of light, which I'm sure they have, and I have. And this is how we all go on to live, I think, freely. This is part of it, isn't it? How we connect and talk, like you said, the light starts to find and spread. And this is how we do it from a grassroots level. So thank you, Anna. Is there anything else in terms of people, in terms of wanting to get in touch with you as well and reach out for any reason, whether your classes or to work with you as a therapist?
Well,
Can you
there
share?
are two websites. There is lifeastrologer.com and there is lifehypnosis.com, and people can get in touch with me through that. There are two podcasts. There's In the Light, Growing Your Soul, which you'll find on YouTube. And there is also, if you are into astrology, my Life Astrologer channel, on which I interview lots of amazingly wonderful astrologers. So, and if you are wanting to learn astrology, then you might be happy to know that I'm beginning a course for beginners or people who have a little bit of knowledge but want to deepen it in November. So there's lots of different options.
Yeah, I can highly recommend. And it just sounds like, as well, when you said that there are lots of tools available to us when we are ready. And astrology definitely is one that is really helping me. So once we can get to that stage of maybe asking for help, there's lots of support. So thank you so much for all the work you do and taking time out today. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Anna. Take care.